You're listening to Talking Africa, the podcast that gets behind the news from the continent, brought to you by the Africa Report. My name is Nick Norbrook. Welcome to the pod. For all the latest news, analysis and comment on coronavirus, and also for our non-coronavirus reporting, please head to theafricareport.com. We have an exclusive interview with Nigerian author Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, and a great article on the resilience of Tanzania's economy, and lots more to distract, delight and entertain. We have a packed show for you today. We speak to our reporters, Kolisa Philip in Johannesburg, Morris Kiruga in Nairobi, and Tofe Ayeni in Lagos, as well as our editor-in-chief Patrick Smith, to find out how the easing of the lockdown is going, how Ghana has been quick and successful in its geographical approach to testing, how Nigeria's Kaduna State has tackled the crisis by teaching students via radio, the huge corona cluster in Nairobi's eastern suburb, and the politics being played by the Trump administration over the World Health Organization, that and much, much more. We begin in Johannesburg.
Hey Nicholas, so about 2 weeks ago, or on the 1st of May, level 4 of our lockdown restrictions came into force. That basically means that in addition to food, we can go now and shop for winter clothing. We can shop for winter bedding as well. If you're an athlete or a runner, you can also shop for your winter wear and go about your run in peace. The government allows people to exercise in their neighborhoods within a 5-kilometer radius. They're also allowing us to, order food. Uber Eats has opened up. Some restaurants have started operating again, which is welcome relief for people who rely, on cooked meals by others. But there's been quite a bit of controversy in the Western Cape. Nicholas, if I may mention that, where there've been ad hoc protests by surfers because they want to be allowed to surf, and there was quite a large activity on Cape Town's promenade when the government also announced that people could exercise between 6 a.m. in the morning and 9 a.m. in the morning, but after that you have to go back home. So, it's been quite busy on that front, but there's also been controversy because the government initially announced that we were going to be allowed to buy cigarettes, but then they rescinded that decision, and they were threatened with court action by the Tobacco Association, but then the association eventually backed down. So in a nutshell, that's pretty much the situation in Johannesburg and Cape Town.
Halisa, can I just intervene? I've got a great anecdote, and I just wondered if you could confirm it. A friend of mine in Zimbabwe is telling me that there's a roaring trade now in smuggled Zimbabwean cigarettes coming into South Africa at double the usual price. So while the Zimbabwean economy is suffering from the pandemic, they've managed to find a way for at least some of their manufacturing, their tobacco crop and their exports, to get a boost. Have you seen any of these cheap Zimbabwean cigarettes?
Patrick, I don't want to, mislead you. No, but I wouldn't be surprised because there is indeed a thriving black market for both cigarettes and alcohol. For instance, a bottle of gin that costs about 100 Rand is going for about 600-700 Rand in the black market. People are buying packets of cigarettes for triple the prices that you would usually get at retail level.
Wow.
And I saw something online about somebody who'd bought a packet of cigarettes, 20s, for I think about 140 Rand. Usually the price is about 56 Rand. But when he when he opened up the packaging, the whole thing was filled up with sawdust. So there's a bit of a, of creativity as well in the illicit economy.
There has also been incredible statistics about the way that smokers are strangely protected from coronavirus. And here in France, the tobacco stores have been one of those shops considered absolutely vital and cannot be closed. Morris, what's happening in Nairobi? We've been hearing rumors of restaurants opening and people treating them like bars more than restaurants. Is that possibly true?
Yes. So over the last, I think, unlike, say, Tanzania that has been doing weekly updates, we've been getting daily ones. And in the last, one of the most recent press by the health minister, Mutahi Kagwe, he just opened restaurants again because they locked them up, I think, last month. And then he was complaining that people are going to a restaurant and buying one sausage and two beers. So and then, then they would move to another restaurant and do the same thing because they tried to do it. They tried to reopen restaurants, sort of like a soft reopening of the economy in Nairobi because other than say lower socio-economic areas that are still thriving, eateries everywhere else have been closed. So that didn't go so well, predictably so. So I don't know what they've decided now, but they've had to lock down a part of Nairobi called Isili that is mostly Kenyan Somalis, and it's a thriving sort of, it's not really a downtown. It's a thriving place in Nairobi, and they've had to lock it down, and there's very, very many people in there. And so the reports I've gotten is it's, for example, somebody who had curfew papers and works in Italy told me that she found very many people trying to get into it. And then in Mombasa, they've locked down a part of it called Old Town because for the same reasons. They say there's a huge cluster there and it could spread and all that. But at the same time, they're struggling to balance between how do you keep people safe and at the same time let them live. But now, something like the curfew has become a money-minting operation for the cops. They're charging a tax. So, for example, yesterday, somebody had to pay about $12 to enter their building. Like, they got there at exactly 7 p.m. But we haven't heard of any murders in the recent past, beyond, I think, the first maybe 6, 7, but I figure maybe it's because they're not being reported. But there's a sense of just stasis in Nairobi. At this point, it's just more numbers every day, sort of knee-jerk reactions to some things, reopen restaurants, don't reopen bars. The biggest question hasn't been answered this far, which was rent. Everybody has been asking the government to give direction on rent. This includes tenants and landlords alike, because Nairobi is mostly sort of a renting city. So that's been a huge problem also because people can't go home. But over the last week, traffic is back on the road, which probably suggests that people are going back to work and to their enterprises. And I've also not been seeing very many people with masks, or at least on my side of town, probably just, but we're here still.
And just on that Eastleigh thing, is that because of a spike in cases in Somalia over the last month?
Well, they say that there was a cluster, I think it was a mosque cluster, an imam or something. But it seemed like all the new cases that were getting in the reason, maybe the last 2 weeks, seem to be coming from just Isili. So it could be that, and it could also be because it's a very populated place, like it's a very populated section of Nairobi. On a normal day, you can barely drive through because of how many people there are on the road, and they live there, they work there. So they had to close it down. But I don't know whether it can last, given that it's not really it's a trading economy. It doesn't really produce anything, so they'll have to supply food and water and very many things.
Thanks, Morris. Tofi, they have been easing the lockdown in Lagos as well. How's that been going?
Hi, Nick. So they have eased the lockdown in most of Nigeria and in Lagos. So the lockdown lasted for 5 weeks, but they've eased it to try and restart the economy. In Lagos, we do have a curfew from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. and there's still bans on large gatherings. We also have to wear masks if we are out, and supermarkets and markets are allowed to be open, but only till 4 o'clock Monday to Thursdays. Restaurants can be open, but only to do takeout as well. So there has been an easing of the lockdown, but not things aren't quite back to normal yet. I mean, on the roads, there isn't still, although there are more cars on the road, there isn't the like traffic jam that we're used to in Lagos. So I think people are still remaining indoors, especially as offices have to close by 3 p.m. and there's limits on how many people can be in the office at the same time. There should only be essential staff in the offices. But the cases have gone up a lot this week since the lockdown eased on Monday. Yesterday, there was the highest number recorded in a day. That was 381 in the country, but that was 183 in Lagos. So Lagos is now over 1,000 cases. In the country, it's 3,500 thereabouts. So it does seem to be having an increase in the number of cases, but people do understand why the government has eased the lockdown, as to so many people weren't able to work. So this has allowed more people to get back on their feet.
And I mean, has the economy really restarted? I mean, it's very early days, obviously, but do you get a sense that offices are opening, factories are opening?
I know some offices are opening, but then at the flip side of that, there are some people that can afford it, they've decided to not go back, even if their employers have asked them to, because they don't think it's worth the risk. So I think for the people that need to, it has been good for them to be able to go back. I think it is restarting little by little, but not, I think, yeah, as you said, it's early days, so perhaps we'll see. But we don't know if the government is going to re-lock down because of the numbers, or they're going to continue with these restrictions. So we're just kind of waiting to see.
This really is a global challenge at the moment. Italy, lifted its own lockdown a week or so ago, and they've already seen cases creep back up. I think in northern Japan, they're seeing exactly the same thing happening. It's a very tough thing to balance the economic recovery with an increase in cases. Just yesterday, the World Health Organization, Africa-focused department of the World Health Organization, held a press conference and warned that if containment measures weren't successful in Africa, the continent could see deaths of up to 190,000, with potentially 44 million Africans being infected. Patrick, there seems to be politics being played with the WHO at the moment. Tell us a little bit about the goings-on in Geneva. President
Trump of the US, about a month ago, launched a full-bore attack on Tedros Ghebreyesus, the head of the WHO, and has since cut US funding to the body, and that's set in train a number of sort of US diplomatic attacks on Tedros as an individual and on the WHO as an institution. And that funding, although it's not going to affect the short-term operations of the WHO, it could really undermine what it's trying to do in the longer term, work with poorer countries, do work on drug pricing and all the rest of it. And that gets into the whole contentious area of intellectual property, the development of vaccines, who pays for the research, who gets to get generic drugs, who gets to get cheap vaccines, and so on. So last week, the US ambassador to the UN in Geneva, a guy called Andrew Bernberg, convened a meeting of all the African ambassadors in Geneva. And the topic was US view of the WHO. And it may not be a big surprise that none of the ambassadors were interested in meeting, the African ambassadors were interested in meeting the US ambassador for this teleconference. So in the end, it was agreed that they would send a representative. the Congolese ambassador to Geneva, who sort of heads the health group among the African ambassadors. And he sat in